Ryan Lawrence, Phillies beat writer at thephillyvoice.com and at Ryan Lawrence 21 on Twitter. He writes, it was an awful first half of the baseball season, but he gives you some encouraging signs from the first half of the baseball season. I wonder how long he sat around and thought about some of those. Also, because
you mean to find 5?
Yes, and he also writes about the 5 biggest concerns that he took from the first half of the baseball season. Ryan joins us now on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN, with the Phillies, 5 games worse than the second worst team in baseball. As he tweets, hard to say their rebuild hasn't taken a step back. What's going on, my friend? How are you?
Not much. How are you guys?
Always good. Summertime down the shore, man. But a bad baseball team makes a long summer for guys like you having to cover the team on a day
I'm
in
down
and
the
day
shore right now. Yeah,
there
man.
you go. A little all-star break for you.
We all need an all-star break. That's right. We all need it.
Pete McCannon was in Stone Harbor. I know that was his plans, right?
Yeah, man.
It's all about the beach.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm in Avalon, so I'm just one town down from him. Yeah, I haven't seen him, though.
Well, you wrote a lot about this team, including some of the concerns of the first half and also some of the positives here. So let's start with the positive stuff. You know, it's Philadelphia. We're always positive, right? Let's look at the good things.
Yeah, right.
I wanted to know 5 encouraging things. First off, how long did it take you to find 5?
It's funny. Yeah, I heard you say that. I guess I had an idea to do 2 different stories this week, and one being the concerns and one being the positives. And yeah, the concerns obviously rolled off the tongue a little quicker. Listing 5. Yeah, I would say a little bit longer, but maybe not as long as you think. I mean, there are a lot of I don't know. A Major League Baseball organization is there's a lot to it. It maybe took a little bit longer to come with the 5, maybe rather than 3. But even still, I feel pretty confident that they are, 5 encouraging signs. And it doesn't necessarily mean they're all signs that this team is going to get better all of a sudden. But look, there had to be something good you can pluck from 3.5 months of baseball, I would hope. So.
Yes. Well, let's ask this. When you went to Clearwater, did you have any inclination that the 2017 Phillies would be on pace for the worst record in franchise history?
Yeah, they're on pace for the worst record for a 160-game season. Yeah, I tweeted that today. But no, probably not. I mean, I think that some of the upgrades that they had made in the winter, I mean, none of them were huge. But, for example, adding a guy like Howie Kendrick should help. Adding an arm like Clay Buchholz should help in terms of giving them another guy to give them innings. So, a lot of these things didn't necessarily work out. I mean, Neshek worked out. Kendrick did work out, but he hasn't been able to stay on the field, which is important. But, yeah, a lot of the other ones didn't work out. But, no, I never saw this as a team that was going to, hover for a winning record or even be able to get to 500. I thought they were going to be a bad team. I thought they were going to be a last-place team. But no, I didn't necessarily think they were going to be this bad. A lot of that is, some of the pitchers took a step back, which isn't, too surprising. Young pitchers, it kind of happens. They all have growing pains. I mean, a guy like Eichhoff, you couldn't expect him to just be great from day one and never struggle at any point in his career. A lot of young pitchers go through struggles. And then their hitters, that's probably the most concerning things are guys like Franco and Herrera, 2 guys that I had in my first story of concerns. Both of those guys have either taken a step back in Herrera's case or in Franco's case really hasn't reached the potential everybody hoped he would. He is only 24, which is the same age as Rhys Hoskins, so we probably need to give him a little bit longer to get going. But even still, this time next year, if he's still the same guy, it's hard to see them moving forward with him.
Ryan Lawrence, taking a look at some of the positives first. One is Aaron Altair, who I guess last year he kind of burst on the scene, cooled off a bit. Now he had the full spring training. That's not an easy injury to come back from. A lot of times when you have a wrist injury, that can really mess with your swing and your power. But he has been one of the positives. I think most Philly fans would agree. But do you look at Aaron Altair as a everyday, long-term piece for this squad?
I think we'll know more, and I think Matt Klentak made a good point a week ago when he talked to the press, or I guess it was less than a week ago, Saturday, when he said that, you don't make any final decisions on July 9th or July 8th, that, you have to let the whole season play itself out. So I think Altair is a great example that he's a guy that, should be given the next 2.5 months to prove that this wasn't a mirage. And to his credit, he hasn't slowed down. So, he has sustained the success for a decent period of time. But even still, kind of like Cesar Hernandez last year, you want to see him keep doing it. So, yeah, I can't sit here and say for sure that, yes, Aaron Altherr is a building block piece. Aaron Altherr will definitely be a corner outfielder for the next contending Phillies team. But, it's not a bad thing that he has produced what he's produced. And, yeah, I think that you'll know more to see how he finishes the season. If he has numbers that are similar to this at the end of the season, hits 20, 25 home runs, has a batting average and an on-base percentage, in the 280 to 300, and then the 330 to 360 range. That's something good to build on going into next year. But like I said, I'd rather see how he finishes before I proclaim him anything.
Another guy who I guess is good to be on this list is Aaron Nola, who he got drafted high. He's had some injury issues, but he's got some very intriguing numbers to build off of. And is he? I don't want to say exceeded expectations, but are you maybe projecting him a little differently than maybe people were when he first came up?
The way you finished that question was interesting because I think that I liked him when he came up, and I think I think the thing about him when he got drafted and when he came up is everybody kind of said not a number one type guy, but a guy that should pitch somewhere at the top of your rotation. A pretty good starter. Maybe it could top out as a number two. And I'm not saying that I think now that he's ace type material, but we have to remember his first 25 starts, and I wrote this in that story. I have the numbers. His first 25 big league starts were really good. His ERA, I think, was around 3.12. His strikeout to walk ratio was really good. And then, it was just about last June, I think, end of June or so, that he started to go in a slump. And then he was on the DL, and he missed the rest of the year. And, everybody was concerned. He was probably the number one concern going into spring training is because he had a bad elbow and never had surgery. Yeah, I don't know if he's exceeded. I've always thought pretty highly of Nola, that if he's healthy, that he could be a really good pitcher. And again, I don't want to say he could be, I don't want to slot him in any spot in the rotation, but I think that if you add a free agent starter, a proven guy, kind of like the Cubs did in a Lester, if you do that in a couple years and take some pressure off Nola, then I think that makes Nola even better. So I think he could certainly slot toward the top of your rotation if he's healthy. I think he's proven that for the most part in his career. You look at his starts. I mean, the run he's in now, the last, I think it's 7 to 10 starts have been really good. Again, strikeout to walk ratio is really good, and his ERA is really good. So I think I've always been a Nola fan.
We're looking at some positives or encouraging signs from the Phillies' first half with Ryan Lawrence. The future sluggers, what's that say that one of the positives is in the minor leagues right now, Ryan, that you got to go for 5 positives, and one of them isn't even at the major league level yet?
Yeah, but, I think that's a part of it. And that's why I said that, trying to come up with 5 positives wasn't quite as difficult because you have to understand that a baseball organization, unlike a football organization or a basketball organization, goes beyond the roster, the professional, the whatever major league / professional roster, that you have to look that, the prospects are such a thing. Minor leagues are a real thing. And I even wrote in my season preview, that don't pay attention so much to the record of the major league team. That isn't as much of an indicator of how the rebuild is going as the individual progresses of players, both players on the major league roster and players on the minor league roster. So, the fact that they've got so many pitching prospects in the lower levels, that's a good thing. And some of them have had pretty good first halves. And then, in the upper levels, they have some bats. And, some guys have struggled. J.P. Crawford obviously is one of them. Jorge Alfaro has been inconsistent. But, Rhys Hoskins and Scott Kingery are the 2 guys that I shine some light on as positive signs. And I don't know how they couldn't be positive signs. I mean, they're probably the best players in their respective leagues before Kingery got promoted. I mean, Kingery was the best player in the Eastern League. He's connected with some power. He can really do everything. He's an energy guy. Kind of reminds me of Trey Turner. Plays really good defense in addition to having some he can run the bases real well. So I like him a lot. And, he got promoted to AAA, obviously. I don't know if we'll see him with the Phillies this year because they don't have to add him to the 40-man roster quite yet, and they have to protect some other guys this winter. It's unfortunate that that's the way it works. But then Rhys Hoskins is the other one. And Rhys Hoskins, I think there's a lot to like about this guy. He's really been a disciplined power hitter since he came into the organization at every level. So he hasn't ever stumbled, and he's really gotten better. Between this year and last year, his strikeouts are down, his walks are up. So, yeah, the unfortunate thing for him is he plays the same position as Tommy Joseph, who's had a decent first half, but, Tommy Joseph's only just a year older than Hoskins, too. So I think what the Phillies would like to do is somehow move Tommy Joseph, and you might be able to get more value from Tommy Joseph if you're able to combine him in another trade, like trade him with a Pat Neshek or trade him with a Jeremy Hellickson. Because, I think Hoskins is ready. He's definitely been a bright spot and probably should be on this roster and probably will be on this roster before long.
Spending a few minutes with Ryan Lawrence from PhillyVoice.com, Phillies beat writer. And how about Freddie Galvis, Ryan, because you write that he's a positive, and I did see those columns that were on Freddie Galvis last week, multiple columns in different places about what kind of a team leader he was. I was at Sunday's game where he went yard, not once but twice, so that's a positive too. But what's Freddie Galvis's future, especially, and you mentioned the guy, J.P. Crawford, waiting in the wings?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's really interesting that and I wrote this, that we're even having this conversation because, 2 years ago, or not even 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago, going into last year, J.P. Crawford was considered a top 5 prospect in all of baseball, and Freddie Galvis was a hitter with an OPS. It was not very good. I think it was below 700 in his career. But, yeah, you have to give him some credit. He's the guy that's improved his offensive game, which is always going to be flawed. He's always going to be the guy that doesn't get on base enough. And that's going to be the thing that people harp on him for forever. But he has shown power. He hit 20 home runs last year, I believe, or right around then. He's on pace for that again this year. He has a knack for getting hits in big spots. That's an actual thing you can look up. Clutch Stats is on Baseball Reference. You can see what he hits with 2 outs and runners on scoring position. You can see how he hits seventh inning and beyond in close games. And he's thrived in those areas. And then we all know he's just a ridiculously talented defender. If there's a better defensive shortstop in baseball, I'd have to see it with my own eyes. He makes every play look routine. But yeah, what is his future here? It's hard to say. The good thing is he's not a free agent until after the 2018 season. So I think that's really good timing, really, because by this time next year, the All-Star break, we should know if J.P. Crawford has reached his potential he'll be 23 then. He should be ready for the big leagues then. He needs to show a little bit more offensively. And if he does that, they'll be happy to promote him. And then maybe they can trade Freddie and get some value for Freddie. But you're talking to one of the bigger fans of Freddie Galvis' game. I like a lot that he does. Again, everybody harps on the on-base percentage. I like to point out the stuff that he does do, which is pretty much everything else. And again, he's a team leader. He's a guy that brings energy, which is an important thing when you're on a team that's as bad as the Phillies are. It's easy to get down. It's easy for guys to start griping, and it's easier for bad eggs to emerge. He's a guy that brings that positive vibe all the time. And again, in a 162-game season where these guys are going at it every day, that's an underrated thing that you can't really measure with stats.
How about, Ryan, tell the listeners why John Middleton is a positive for the Phillies this season and moving forward?
Yeah, you're talking about a guy that a couple years ago was kind of a part of the ghost ownership where we didn't really see them, know them, and he's emerged in the last 2 years. It's pretty much, I think it was the press conference when they said they were bringing Andy McPhail to be the new team president. It was about 2 years ago, maybe a little over. I think it was maybe the end of June of 2015. He was at the press conference, and he was very vocal, and he's been that way pretty much since. He's a guy that I'm trying to think of the word to describe him. He almost has a little bit of Steinbrenner in him. Like he's a guy that just wants to win and is very competitive and wears his heart on his sleeve. And he's pretty much a Philadelphia fan who just happens to be a billionaire and is the control person of the Phillies. So, when they're making big decisions on adding free agents and trading for big name, big contract guys, he's the guy that signs off on it. To have a guy that's that hungry to put a winning team on the field again, to see attendance a lot better than it's been, I really would be surprised if they don't do something big within the next 6 to 8 months because they need to bring people into this ballpark. And I cannot imagine them going into 2018 just hoping and praying that, on prospects. They need to bring in a legit name, and I think a guy like Middleton would be the driving force to do that.
Ryan Lawrence is with us. PhillyVoice.com at Ryan Lawrence 21. There's some of the positives. How about some of the bad? And you got to, point probably right at the top of the list at Franco as the biggest disappointment so far.
Yeah, and it's a shame because you see glimpses with this guy, but that's just it. I mean, baseball, maybe more than any sport because of the sheer number of games, is about consistency. And he just hasn't really ever been able to do that. And maybe the first half of his first season before he broke his wrist or broke his hand. I forget if it was a wrist. He got hit by a Jeremy Hellickson pitch of all things during his rookie year. But before that, he was hitting 280. I think his OPS was above 800. I think he was on pace for like 30 home runs. He's striking out more. He's swinging at bad pitches. It just seems like the discipline is never going to be a part of his game. And when you're a power hitter and you aren't a disciplined hitter, there isn't much of a ceiling there. He just needs to be more disciplined. It really just comes down to that. And he's 24, which is still somewhat young. Again, if you remember that he's the same age as a guy like Rhys Hoskins. So probably needs to give it a little bit longer of a window to get going. But as I said earlier, I don't know how much longer that window will be. I think this time next year we'll know one way or another if he's a part of their plans.
Yeah, and he's been a little bit of a disappointment. Another guy, I don't know if you can call him a disappointment, maybe when he has pitched, but the injuries have really, caught up to Vince Velasquez. He's missed time previous to coming to Philly last year, and again this year. He's got a Class A start at Clearwater, but he seems kind of like he is in limbo right now with what his future is.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing you want when you acquire a pitcher is to be a year and a half into his tenure with the team and still be an incomplete grade, and that's kind of what he is. They were the one thing that they're trying to do during this rebuild is evaluate young players and see whether or not they're going to be a part of the core going forward. And they really haven't been able to evaluate him too much because he's been hurt for. Maybe I'm over-exaggerating that a little bit, but because he has been on the DL, but, it was only a couple weeks. I think last year, maybe it was 3 weeks. This year is a little over a month. But even still, the fact that he hasn't given them a full season and the fact that he's been inconsistent when he has gotten opportunities, it's still an incomplete grade. I still think you have to do everything you can to try to see if he can be a starter. And there's no reason to pull the plug on that too quickly. You just don't need a closer just yet. I understand he can be one. I think that's a possibility. But, the fact of the matter is you don't need a legit closer until you're ready to contend, and this team isn't ready to contend. So they can at least let this season play out, let him continue to make starts. He could probably get another 12 starts when he comes back from the DL and see if he can get going. And then you'll know whether or not, kind of in the same case what I said with Altair earlier, let him have the last half of the season to see what he is. I mean, with Altair, if he continues to do what he does, then yeah, surely he's a part of this team moving forward. He's penciled in as a starter next year. With Velasquez, he needs to go out there and give them at least 6 innings, maybe even 7 per start, and show off that he's more than just a power pitcher. That he can command his pitches and that he can be a little bit more economical with his pitches, because he just hasn't been that. And because of that, he's putting a strain on the bullpen pretty much all the time. But again, I think you have to give him the next 2.5 months to continue to see if he can do that. It's on him. He knows it too.
That should be an interesting story to kind of keep an eye on, the rest of this season, the second half, see if he can bounce back and give them some good starts. The other guy, you wrote about Herrera. I was not a big fan of the signing. I'm just not a big fan of his play, I guess. I mean, he just seems very inconsistent, kind of aloof. I'm not saying he's not talented, but I just didn't love the deal. I mean, I know they're not paying him a whole heck of a lot of money, but they made a commitment to him. Do they regret that at all, do you think?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I think that, the front office and the coaching staff might have two different opinions on that. It's funny. He's almost like the anti-Freddie Galvis in that he has all these physical – I'm not saying Freddie doesn't have all these physical tools, but he has a lot more offensive physical tools than Galvis does, but he doesn't know how to put it together all the time. He doesn't always play disciplined. He doesn't always play smart. And so it's frustrating when you have a guy that has that talent and can't seem to, put it all together more often than not. And I should say that his first 2 years were good. And so I think it would be Monday morning quarterbacking it if we're saying that deal was terrible, unless you don't like the antics. But because, he has produced in his first 2 years. This year, not so much. And that's why now all that the bad stuff kind of comes to the front, because you can kind of put up with some of the theatrics when he's producing, but he hasn't produced this year. So yeah, Do they regret it? I don't know. I mean, I think that, again, like you said, it's not that bad of a deal. So if there is another team out there that says, well, we're a good team, we're a contending team, we could put up with a knucklehead as long as he's a productive knucklehead. I'm using knucklehead because I want to sound like someone that's 40 years old. But anyway, and be also politically or whatever. Anyway, I just think that, that contract could be a valuable thing to to another team, a team that, might have, it's all about kind of cost certainty. And if you have an all-star player or a guy like Odubel, I think he's only 24, 25, that you think can still be a productive player, then that might not be a prohibitive contract. It might be a contract that actually looks good because, you compare that to, say, I'm going to go in the opposite extreme, like a Giancarlo Stanton contract that kind of hinders you or prevents you from doing other things, where a Odubel contract, as long as he's producing, doesn't look as bad. So I think it'd be interesting to see how he finishes the season. And if he looks like the hitter he was in the previous 2 years, that actually might be a contract you're able to trade because another team might like it.
Ryan Lawrence with us. There's nothing wrong with 40. Mike Gill is 40. I'm 46. Just saying, don't diss all us old guys. As he talks a little Phillies baseball. On your disappointments, Ryan, a good turn of the phrase, too, where you have the section where it says pigs stuck in the mud, because there's a lot of guys that the fans want to see, and maybe even Pete Buchanan would like to see, but some of those guys in the minors are blocked, and, of course, some of them have disappointed.
Yeah, as I said, I mean, both Hoskins and Kingery have been great, and Tom Eshelman has been great. Justin Terrian is a reliever you're going to hear from very soon. He has great stuff. I mean, he has back-end reliever stuff, has a wicked slider to go along with a mid-90s fastball. So they do have some encouraging signs up in the upper levels of the minor leagues, but they also have some disappointments. And J.P. Crawford is first among them. He didn't get over the Mendoza line until, I think, late last month. Still has good on-base skills, and he's still a guy that I think his career on base in the minor leagues is above 350. But he still needs to show more. I mean, his slugging percentage is just criminally low. So when you're a guy that walks a decent amount but doesn't bring a lot of extra base hits, you still have to get some singles here and there. So I think he still needs to get that batting average up a little bit. And again, I know on-base percentage is more important than batting average, but you can't expect a big league promotion if you're hitting 215 in AAA. And he's had a full season now at AAA. He is young. I think he's still 22. They have time for him. They can be patient with him. He doesn't have to be added to the 40-man roster until this upcoming winter. But yeah, he's been a disappointment. Jorge Alfaro, I love his tools. I think he really could emerge into an all-star caliber catcher for sure. He has the power bat. He has the Ivan Rodriguez type arm, but he's a guy that, also kind of like, I'm trying to think who the other guy is. He doesn't walk enough, and he strikes out a ton. And, if that's the hitter you are, then that's the hitter you are, but you better do the other things. You better hit 30 home runs, and you better play really good defense. And, his defense is still a work in progress behind the plate. So these were pretty much their top two prospects going into the year besides Moniak. And neither one of them has really taken a strong enough step forward. I mean, going into the year, you hope that you could promote one of these guys or both of these guys by the All-Star break, and neither one of them has really been on that radar because they've struggled.
Ryan Lawrence with us. We'll leave you with this. A lot of murmurs about Stanton and Yelich. Those two names have come up not once but twice. Came up in a column in a Boston paper about a month ago. I don't know that I love the possibility of making that deal, but number one, you think it bears anything? And number two, are you a fan of going after those type of guys?
I mean, I don't know. I think that's a pretty complicated idea, and I think that the Stanton contract is not a great one. Believe me, I was just talking about how I think they need a marquee type player to showcase this in Bank Park and get people through the turnstiles. They do need to do that, absolutely. And I don't know if they have that guy in their farm system, and then they need that guy soon. I'm just not sure if that would be the right call. I think he's just due to make way too much money after his 30th birthday. I mean, I'm talking, I think, more than $250 million. I alluded to this when I wrote I think the last time I was on with you guys, I talked about a trade like this. about bringing in a big contract guy, and being a buyer in addition to being a seller. So, I alluded to the idea of that. And what I said with Stanton is I just think it's way too big of a risk, that money. And again, they have financial flexibility more than any team in baseball, but that doesn't mean you blow it all on one guy who may not, who may not age well. I mean, he's a big guy. Look at Albert Pujols, look at Prince Fielder. Those are guys that those massive $200 million, 10 to 12 year contracts did not look so good, more than halfway through. And I'm not saying that's definitely going to happen with Stanton. I'm just saying, in 2 years from now, or actually a year and a half from now, you can go and you could spend that kind of money on a Bryce Harper or a Manny Machado. I'm not saying that you're guaranteed to get either one of those, but I think I'd rather go that route. I think I'd rather try to trade for another guy that might be a little less of a risk, that could still be a possible building block. Look, I love the idea of watching Stanton at Citizens Bank Park. I think anybody would, but the amount of dollars and years, it's crazy. It's not my money, understandably, but I just think that's a big risk. I mean, everybody thought that Ryan Howard contract was bad. That was only a 5-year deal. You're talking about a guy that I think still has 9 or 10 years left on his contract, maybe more than that. So I don't know. It's a little scary to me.
I agree. That's a big deal. And, again, I don't know that trading for a guy, having to give up a lot and getting a guy in return, I don't know that he all of a sudden reverses fortune for this franchise in terms of wins and losses. That's not the way baseball really works. Ryan Lawrence at Ryan Lawrence 21, phillyvoice.com. Make sure you check out both of those articles, a little bit more in-depth stuff on the 5 positives and negatives of the first half of the Phillies season. Ryan, enjoy the rest of your vacay time down the shore.
By a mile he is.
Yeah, that's for sure. See you guys. Have a good one.